Hi there, I've got a window of opportunity I'd like to take to show you a bit about the game Triumphant Fox. It's designed by Dirk Blenneman, produced by Moments in History in 1994. It's a game on the Gazla battle, May to June 1942. To start off, I think it's a great game. There's with one sort of major flaw. It's not a killer, but it's it's in your perception, but I'll get to that later. It's by the same designer who did von Manstein's Backhand Blow. Developed, I think it's his son, Uli Blenneman, has developed both of them. John Krantz also helped develop this game. Now, von Manstein's Backhand Blow is an excellent game. It has an innovative system for activation and operations, and it's a really good representation of the battle for Kharkov in 1943. The only problem with it is that it takes a long time to play. It's an operational game. It's a quick playing game, meaning that the action is you don't have long downtime at all. The action's sort of almost continuous, but it does take a long time to play, and that is the same problem with this game. An excellent system as well, with an innovative system, a procedure in it for taking your turns. And the only reason that I would not play it more is because it does take a long time to play. I'm going to briefly compare it to this game here, which is the same battle represented in the SPI's 4 battles in North Africa. They call it Cauldron here. It was Operation Theseus for the Germans, and this is from 1976. So it's really interesting to compare two different takes on the same battle. And it will help sort of highlight a bit about what makes this version quite spectacular in many ways and different. So the first thing is that just to sort of set the scene, so you've got Tobruk here, you've got Gazala here, you've got Bir Hakim here, and you've got Bir El Gibi here. It's the exact same layout on the Cauldron game map too. Here each hex represents about 3.5 kilometers, and a turn can represent anything between 1 and 6 days. The reason being, we'll get to in just a minute. The battle is that you have the Brits, several empire units. So you've got units from India, South Africa, and I should call them the Allies because there's even a Free French unit start on the map in Bir Hakim. And this is a network. You might be able to see the red hexes. These are a network of minefields. So this is these are minefield hexes, and then within those you have certain areas that have quite literally a box, and they were called boxes, and essentially they were extremely what can I say? They were defensive positions, as they weren't like permanent structures, but they were fortified out of the dunes. So building up dunes out of walls, out of dunes, and then sandbags and whatever else they had going. So the British had made some gains. They took Tobruk and they built this massive network of minefields, so stretching from the sea all the way to here, Bir Hakim. That's 60 kilometers of continuous minefields, and some quite complicated. So you can see you've got kind of like an island in there which isn't mined, and the same here, and then interspersed with these boxes, heavily fortified positions. So the Allies are holding that line, and just next to them, a few kilometers away, 20 or so, in fact only like maybe 7 or 8 in places, there's the Axis forces. So you have some of Deutsche Afrika Korps have arrived, you've got other German units, and you've got Italians as well, the Ariete Division, etc. the units represented are let me just check. So yeah, so you have divisional headquarters, and then you have like regiments and battalions in this game for each unit. So you have color coding, so each division has a headquarter, and essentially the game is about you're trying to do as well as or better than Rommel did. There's a counter for Rommel included in the game. He has an effect, and essentially they try to fight their way around here, get to Tobruk, and their problem is that the main supply lines to the desert along the coast. So they have a tenuous supply line, and to get all the way around like that is not really doable. So essentially you have to break through the minefields and be able to carry supply through and get to Tobruk. So that was the objective. Rommel did it eventually. But I'm playing there's two training, three, or is it four? A few training scenarios which are just teaching you very basics. And then there's two main scenarios. One is 4 turns long, one is 8 turns long. The 4-turn scenario, you just have to try and get to Knightsbridge and Arkona boxes. You're not really expected to get to Tobruk. You can still win if you get those. And then the 8-turn game, you essentially you have to take Tobruk as the axis. The Allies can gain victory points, so you get victory points for taking certain locations like Eladam here, Knightsbridge, Arkona, and you get more victory points the sooner you get them. The Allies can get victory objectives from taking Axis supply routes just over here on the edge of the map. So what this essentially means is that at least in my play here, this is quite static because the Italians, it's mainly made up of Italians, the Italian unit's not really strong enough to punch through and leave enough units behind, so they really have to sort of hold the line while Rommel and the main part of sort of the Africa Corps and the Arietta division who've got fantastic engineers can take Bir Hakim and maybe come through here. They've also made some inroads through here and go around for the main objectives. So, I mean, you potentially could just try and bash through, but you have to deal with the minefields. And it's handled in a particular way. I'll speak about that in a minute. But first I want to get to the heart of this game system, and that is to do with the operations cycle or action point cycle. So, just before I forget, you also have Axis marker displays and Allied force markers displays. Normally they would be separated if you weren't playing solo. So you can have hidden forces. I'm just really using them as placement so that I don't have huge stacks. So not really huge, but bigger stacks on the board. But they do allow hidden movement, and you do have armoured car and reconnaissance battalions in this game, and they are extremely useful for then revealing these. So in a two-player game there is a bit of a shell game going on about who you don't know how big a force that is moving around on the map until you either it fights you, you fight it, or you recon it. So often war games, and this one is being an old is you have what's called I go, you go, and so what is meant by that is that when I go, I move all my forces. In this case, that's you've got Germans here, Italians around here, and the Germans here. So it's very interesting. The units are practically exactly the same. You have divisions broken down to regiments and brigades. Regiments and battalions, I think, in both games. But so one side would move all of their units and the other side would move all of their units. Not so in this game. Now, what's quite fashionable nowadays is what they call a chip pull system, whereby you pull chips out of a cup, and if it activates, say, 90th Panzer, then you move all the 90th Panzer units. Then you pull the next chip, and if maybe there's 2 for 90th Panzer and it gets to go twice, or another division might not be on your side or on your opponent's side gets to go. And so you alternate like that. This is a similar kind of thing, but essentially what you do is you roll for initiative each every operation cycle or whatever, and whoever goes, they then choose which of theirs. So each division has a marker on this track, starts at 7, goes all the way down to 0. And this is your action points that you have to... No, sorry, this is the amount of operations you can do in a turn. So some units are very active and they could operate 7 times in a turn, potentially. Others are not quite so operation friendly, not quite so operationally competent, and they could only go maybe some of the Italians start at 4 5s, and the Germans all start at 5 at 7 and 1 at 5, and then you have the same for the Allies. There's 10 like 5s and 6. There's a 4 there. So some units are potentially able to do a lot more than others. But what happens is, so you choose one, you move it down 1 here, you mark an operation has occurred, and then you check how many action points. So if it's you're a 7 and you move down, you perform an operation, you get 7 action points. The next time you perform an operation, you would get 6, and so forth going down. Now, your opponent can try to react, and if they are successful in their reaction, then say if this fellow tried to react, he would, instead of getting, he's on 5, instead of getting 5 action points, he would get 3 reaction points to perform things. And then I haven't actually done it yet in my solo play, because being solo, and also the Allies haven't really had the opportunity. But then I think the person who was acting loses their activation. But anyway, the point being that as the turn goes on, you just keep doing that, and so units are moving down, 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 and then you're counting the operations here, and every 10 operations, you mark it on here, and you have what's called the sudden turn end goes down. You use a 10-sided die in this game for combat for everything, and once it starts moving down, every time you roll initiative, so you roll initiative after every activation has happened, if both sides roll equal to or above this number, the turn ends, and that's it. So anyone who has not operated or has not used up all their operations, it doesn't matter, you have to stop. And then you go through a little sort of upkeep cycle, and then everyone regenerates, but they don't regenerate all the way up. So depending on the division, their efficiency and drive and so forth, you might regenerate 2 or 4, 3. I think 4 is the maximum operations or points on this formation track. So that means you're going to start the game at 7, and if say they only move down to 3, then they will go all the way back at 7. But if they've done a lot of operations, and let's say they've gone down to 0, they're only going to go back to 4. So the next game turn, they're only going to have 4 potential activations: reaction and non-reaction. And so what that does is it's great because it means you can do a lot. You can push hard at the beginning, but the harder you push at the beginning, the more tired and weaker your units get, and so there's going to be less activations as the game has gone on. Now there's only 4 game turns. That doesn't seem like many, but you can see, because you're just rolling for initiative for every activation, someone activates, and then every 10 activations this moves down. So classically you're getting 20, 30, maybe 40 probably not that many, around 30 activations is probably reasonable, and that's both sides, so maybe 15 each. It all depends, and you can see every time you activate, Rommel gives a bonus. So 7 here would be 7. If you've got Rommel with you, you get an extra point. You choose what to do. Essentially, move is 1 action point. Try to clear a minefield is 2 action points after moving into it. Fighting is essentially 1 action point, and then you can spend 1 or 2 more action points to make your attack more prepared, and so you get bonuses and so forth like that. And then you can also pay 1 action point for every unit that needs refitting, i.e. if they've been disordered in combat or minefield clearing and so forth. They roll on their efficiency rating to refit. So I'm not going to go into the whole mechanics of the game. Suffice to say that, like Manstein's backhand blow, it's extremely well thought out. You get a large... you have a range, so a die result of 1 to 10 can go all the way up to 20 with modifiers. And so you can get a huge range of outcomes, ranging from, say, 4 hits to the attacker, none to the defender, down to 1 to the attacker, 2 to the defender, and on the other side like that. So that's all hits, and if it's bold you have to roll for disorganisation. So it's attritional, so you, in a sense, units take hits. You've got the hit markers there, and when they reach halfway they lose efficiency and so forth. Then modifiers include things like anti-tank, so units have tank and anti-tank points, so you match them up. That can modify. Terrain can modify as per usual, and then divisional headquarters being in command range can modify. Rommel can modify die roll, etc. So there's lots of things baked into it, and the rulebook's quite hefty, but in actual fact the systems are very easy. It's just that there's sort of quite a lot of different things you can do. So there's like initiative options. You can either act, you can give the other person initiative or pass. Then when you get the initiative or take it, here's the operations. You can do airstrikes. Okay, you've got airstrike counters down there, and they can do 3 different things. There's things like camp grouper, Hecker can do an amphibious landing, etc., etc. So all of this kind of stuff can go on, and there's even every turn you roll for a random event. Like the last turn I had Rommel's Streisler, was it Chrysler Storch, his the aeroplane he used. Essentially it was a reconnaissance aeroplane he'd used to fly around here, there and everywhere. It crashed, and so he was out of action for a while, but he came back in, as historically happened. So you also have, if you don't want to use strength point markers, they give you some sheets to photocopy. You can mark hits off in those boxes as well, and that's helpful for setup, those roster sheets. So it's a great game. I love the systems. I love the attritional nature of the combat, and the fact that you've got a wide range of occurrences, but you can really stack it in your favour. So the odds are very simple. You always round up, so you don't have to worry about like half odds. So like carrying decimals and so forth. So you can go from in Tobruk, the best you can get is 2 to 1 against it. In Clear, the best you can get is 1 to, you can even attack on a 1 to 5. You're starting 1 to 1 in the middle, then you can go all the way up to 9 to 1 plus. So you can see with column modifiers and so forth, you can get hefty results in your favour. You're still going to get probably a hit, even if on the best odds. So almost every attack you're going to take a hit, but chances are your opponent will be, if you've got the odds stacked in your favour, your opponent's going to take 1 or 2 more hits, and then they will be rolling for disruption. If they disrupted, they have to retreat back. Hits can be traded for retreats if you're a defender, so that happens as well. So system's a great one for that movement and for the dynamic of this going on, but this is what makes it take so long to play, and that is the only flaw in this game. And it was the same thing with von Manstein's. It's really fast playing, it's very fluid. there's no onerous kind of lookups and things like that. There's not tons of modifiers, but the few you have can give you big shifts, and often they're in your decision. Like, are you having a hasty attack, regular attack, or prepared attack? You decide if you've got the action points for it. But and because of the fluidity in the back and the forth nature, there is, partly because you have so many I go, then you go, then I go, then you go. In between that, you're rolling initiative, you're moving down on these tracks, you're checking action points, you're counting down action points, you're readjusting that. All of that, those little operations that happen quickly, and they don't disturb the flow of the game at all, but they do add up for a time factor. And that's it with this game. It's a great system, but it does take quite a long time to play. It's not a slow playing game, it just takes a while to play. The only other problem I have with it is that I think the desert battles are great for this kind of fluid system of play. However, and you have great things in this, like have zones of control, but units, if you have a lot of, say, tank points and your opponent does not have many anti-tank or tank points, you can slide past them. Obviously, you're keeping them at distance with your tanks, and they're not able to sort of close and waylay you. So there's a lot of manoeuvre going on, but this is perhaps not the best battle to showcase it, because essentially this battle is all about going around Bir Hakim and taking Bir Hakim, and then get it going through here. You have to take Bir Hakim because you're reliant on these roads to extend your supply line. If you do not have these roads, and they all run through, these lateral ones, they all run through Bir Hakim. So if that is not cleared of mines, the Axis just will not have enough. They'd have to operate out of supply. They'd be too weak. They might get a little way, and then they'd just get trounced and pushed back. So you have to clear this of these minefields here. It takes time because it's not. You have to roll here. You need engineers up and so forth like that. It's not easy. It's a minefield's cleared on a 1 to 3 on a D10. But if there's a minefield and a box, such as Bir Hakim itself is, that's only cleared on a 1. Now, you get a modifier between 1 and 3 of -1 and 3, depending on the engineer support that your headquarters can lend. And so you need the Ariete division for that, because they have 3, but that's still less than a 40% chance of clearing that. And from a 6 to 10, you're disorganised. So 50% of the time, your unit's going to be disorganised. So that's another action to reorganise him. And you can see the clock is ticking down, because, especially if the Italians are doing it, they don't have so many activations, and it takes 2 action points to try and clear that, which is the most expensive action. So it takes a lot of time and effort to clear through there. If you don't do it, you're just not going to be able to reach it. So my sense is that yes, you could try and push here, and you can do the scenarios with free setup, so you don't have to set up in the historical starting positions. So you might actually decide, okay, I'm going to have the Desert Africa Corps here, and we're going to try and bust through here. We're not going around Bir Hakim. You might try and do it that way, but in the historical scenario, you have to take that. And if you don't, if there's a problem there, if the die rolls don't go your way, you're pretty much wasted. You do have your main objectives in the scenario I'm doing are these 2 boxes here. You get extra points for here, and there's a point or 2 around here. Oh yeah, for Bir Hakim. So you're going to get that. You need more than 5 points. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So essentially you need these, or maybe that instead of Acroma. And so it's all about trying to get around to there. And that is the key, because of the way the roads and the supply works. So what's it like in this version? Well, it's very similar. So the setup's the same. You've got Bir Hakim here, the Axis setup here. Actually already sort of moved out a bit. The scale's practically the same. Well, I haven't counted the number of hexes. You can see it's a smaller map, but the hexes are smaller, and you've got the same. You've got Tobruk here, Gazela's here, Bihachim's here, and Sidi Rezeg's here. So on this map, it's there, or is it there? So it's proportionally, of course, it's the same. It covers the same area. So the setup's the same. The only thing is here, the minefields handled completely differently. All you have to do is be in the minefield, and other units can pass through. So as long as the unit is in the minefield, it's kind of clear, and supply and so forth can pass through. So you're not having to worry about is the minefield clearing in time. You just have to make sure it clears in time. The only thing you have to make sure is down to fate is, what are your rolls like on dislodging the Free French forces in Bir Hakim. And this is an old style game, so you can see I just started the first turn. You're whizzing out from here. They got big movement rates, running around, surrounding the enemy, because the CRT is essentially retreats. Very odd. Attacker eliminated, but there's no defender eliminated, only on failure to retreat. So it's kind of strange design for effect. It's that old style where it's kind of historically that is really well researched and kept meticulously laid out and studied and so forth, but then you're relying on kind of abstract design for effect, the skill of you in organising your forces to surround the enemy chit, to kind of simulate the skill and efficiency needed in battle operations. Whereas here it's more moved to I'm directing this one here, and they do things and operate more intuitively according to the actual reality. Whereas here it's a bit more chess-like. If you know the rules of chess, you know the strategies, you're performing those strategies rather than kind of something intuitively according with what we understand of reality. So, and then the other odd thing about this, the difference between them, is that here on the Triumphant Fox map, you've got really heavy ridges, lots of rough terrain, and you've got more hills and so forth dotted around here. So I'm talking about these ridges here. Here's all the broken terrain, and these are all hills where units can get advantages. In this map, they're only here. They completely ignored any ridges around here. It's interesting. This area is all completely blank. So this is the first time I've ever played this. This was, in fact, the first war game I ever bought when I was probably about 15 years old in a local hobby shop down in Bristol town centre. Don't think it was called Nobby's Hobbies. I've forgotten the name, but anyway. I bought it off the shelf, took it home, and after the toy war games me and my brother used to play each other, with 1/72 scale figures and tanks and so forth, it was just too dry, and I never actually played a game against anyone. In fact, this was the only map that survived undoctored. I got into role playing, used these maps, drew fantasy islands on them and so forth. So anyway, that's by the by. The point is that this is my first play of this. If this, although because of the kind of the abstract nature of the way the system works, it's not as gripping. It's not as, you don't feel as involved in the dash for the boxes as you do in Triumphant Fox. Here it's more of a competitive puzzle based on this situation. So you have kind of like the historical situation in the background, but on in the foreground you're trying to surround your opponent's units like this and break up their lines and so forth and stop counterattacks. But still, it's interesting the way it has. You have these Panzer Grenadier units. They can assist other units that are adjacent to them that are being attacked by armour. So you have that, which is simulated in here in the tank and anti-tank points, that particular nature of the armoured warfare, because I suppose the open ground and so forth. And also you have lots of artillery that can do bombardments and support. So it is an interesting puzzle working out these attacks and defences and so forth, and then the broad sweep of the battle itself is an exciting one. What I'm trying to say is that I do enjoy my play of this, although this is by far the better system, and a lot more evocative, this bare bones thing might be the one that gets more play, just because it would be quicker and not necessarily easier to get into, because this, like I say, is an easy system, but it's just takes a long time to do everything. So yeah, that's all I want to say about Triumphant Fox. It is interesting the way that, I mean, there's no, people say the chit pull system is the saviour from the horrors of the IGO-UGO system, but in fact every system is IGO-UGO, because I think I've only seen in a few miniatures rule sets actual simultaneous movement. Otherwise you can have simultaneous movement in board games where you have planning ahead, and then you just perform the operations according to the planning. But otherwise, I've only seen one or two miniature rule sets where both sides are actually moving at the same time, interrupting each other and fighting. Very difficult to do. So even a chit pull is, I go with this chit, then you go with your chit, or maybe I go again. They are all I go, you go. It's just that, and also this one, it's not a chit pull, but it has that similar tempo in variation of activation of formations. They're essentially IGO UGOs broken down into tiny pieces. And I haven't played that many chit pull games, but it'd be interesting to see how much time they add to play, because the beauty of IGO, the classic IGO UGO, is I do the whole thing and then it's finished. And then you do the whole thing and it's finished. Yes, some people don't like the downtime, but you do not have all the time spent mechanically in between just adjusting tracks, rolling dice or pulling chits. All of that, none of it takes very long, but because it's happening so often, that all adds up. And I found the same with Richard Berg's turn continuation system. That was from, I've got 1863. I haven't got it handy at the moment, but that was a Civil War. This is Grand Tactical. Von Manstein's backhand blow is operational. So these ones like a Grand Tactical. I don't know, maybe bordering on the edge of operational. But the whole battle for Kharkov, that's like a whole. Your operations to perform like that whole campaign. Here, it's about the actions to complete a battle, which is sort of one operation in itself. I lost my train of thought. So yeah, the turn continuation system is also Grand Tactical, and I found it wonderful. A lot more stimulating than the like this system in here, than the just standard I go, you go. But again, it took a long time to play out, even though it was a very simple game and simple systems, and it flowed quickly. It still took that large amount of time. And I know I've really belaboured this point, but I'm finding it very interesting that it'd be interesting if any chit pullers can comment on things like, I don't know, like Battle Hymn and P Ridge, most recent chit pull that I celebrated chit pull that I can think of by Lee Harvey. I think they call the inventor of the chit pull system. How much longer does that game take to play than a completely comparable one, maybe in the Blue and Grey series? That is, don't know Blue and Grey, so I might be talking out of my hat here. That is about an I go, you go of the same battle at the same scale, with more or less the same unit representation. It's an interesting thing because although the chip pull is very in fashion now, there is part of me hankering back for this old age simplicity of it's gone and it's done, and then it's your go. You do it and it's done, and that's a turn. Whereas this, it's I go, you go, 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 I go, you go. Oh my goodness! There's a turn. That took ages. It's the same reason why I prefer. One of the main reasons why I prefer ASL to ATS, because ATS has this alternating activation where you activate a stack or a unit and then your opponent does the same, and then back and forth, back and forth. It's just almost kind of makes me giddy, the toing and froing. And I find it's harder to, maybe more realistic that way, to retain your initial intention of operation, because so many incidents can happen in between. But it's just so much more calm, I find, something like ASO, where I move all my guys. Yes, you get to interrupt at certain points, but still I continue, I finish my go, and I can go, okay, I at the beginning of my go I was thinking about, I knew what I wanted to do, and then I finished it, and I did and then didn't, but it's done. Now it's over to you. I can sit back for a minute. So that's it, Triumphant Fox. I think it's a great system. I wholeheartedly recommend it, and it's just a shame there's no way around it, that it's going to take longer to play than I go, the you go. I'd hope to get von Manstein's Backhand Blow to show you this more in depth, because I think it's even better game than this. But I've played it opposed a year or two ago, and I've got other games to get through that I've never played, so it's going to be a while before I get to von Manstein's Backhand Blow again. So, and I won't bother doing any more coverage on Cauldron. It doesn't really need that much to be said, and I'm not that enthralled to work my way through the system, but it's really interesting to feel and to go through and to understand the conception given on the battle here as compared to here.